Hey, it's DaILz here, and as you may know, I've actually been doing some competitive Pokemon battling on Pokemon Showdown, and I've actually made a video about it. In fact, I'm actually rendering another video as I am speaking right now. In fact, this is probably going to get rendered afterwards, so I'm making this video because I'm aware that most of my viewers don't know most of the jargon I spew out during my commentary, and I kind of want to alleviate the stress. And you can also learn about competitive Pokemon battling, which is kind of cool. And now anybody can join right in with Pokemon Showdown, so why not? First thing I want to explain are the base stats. Base stats are values that determine the potential of a Pokemon's stat. For example, a Pokemon with a higher base stat in attack will probably have a higher attack than Pokemon with a lower base stat in attack. Next thing I want to talk about are IVs, which are individual values. Every Pokemon has their own. You can't change a Pokemon's IVs after they've been hatched from an egg or caught or whatever. But the IVs and their particular stats affect their potential stat total. So a Pokemon with an IV of 31 in attack will probably have a higher attack than a Pokemon with a 30 IV in their attack or whatever. Next thing to explain are EVs, which are effort value points. At level 100, for every 4 EV points, a Pokemon gains 1 stat point in that stat. For example, 4 EVs in the attack stat will give it +1 attack. A Pokemon can have a max of 254 EVs in a stat. However, since 254 is not a multiple of 4, most people only put 252 EVs in the stat. EVs are a means of specializing Pokemon. For example, Mew can become an offensive Pokemon by investing a lot of EVs into its attack, or it could become a defensive Pokemon by investing in its HP or its defensive stats. Then there are natures. Besides affecting what kind of Pokeblock the Pokemon wants to eat, or what kind of puffin thing or whatever, these actually affect the Pokemon's stats. Now, most natures increase one stat and decrease another. For example, an adamant nature increases a Pokemon's physical attack while lowering their special attack. At this point, there are no natures that increase a Pokemon's HP. Next thing I want to talk about are hold items, which are pretty important in competitive Pokemon battling. One of the most common items you'll find in competitive Pokemon are the choice items. Choice items lock a Pokemon into a move until they switch out. The choice items are the choice band, the choice scarf, and the choice specs. Each one of the choice items increases a specific stat. For example, the choice band increases a Pokemon's attack, the choice scarf increases the Pokemon's speed, and the choice specs increases the Pokemon's special attack. Next, we have the life orb, which increases the strength of the Pokemon's moves, which means it doesn't matter if it uses a special attack or a physical attack, they still get boosted. However, the user takes 10% damage every time an attack is successful. This recoil damage can actually be negated by the ability Sheer Force, and you'll commonly see a Nidoking or a Darmanitan just absolutely wrecking shit because they have Sheer Force and access to Life Orb. Now for an old favorite, Leftovers. At the end of a turn, a Pokemon will actually gain like 6% HP, which is really nice on bulkier Pokemon. Next item I want to talk about is the Eviolite. The Eviolite is an item introduced in Generation 5, which means Black and White 2. The Eviolite increases a not fully evolved Pokemon's defense by essentially +1. I will talk about stat boosting later. What you need to know is that the Eviolite is a pretty important item to the competitive metagame because it essentially made a lot of not fully evolved Pokemon usable, and it's pretty cool. Next thing you might see are the orb items. Holding an orb inflicts a status affliction to the Pokemon holding it. For example, if you're holding a flame orb, that Pokemon's going to get burned at the end of the turn. You might be like, what? However, some Pokemon actually prefer getting status affliction. For example, a Pokemon with Guts gets +1 attack. A Pokemon with Toxic Heal actually gets healed by the toxic poison, and so on and so on. There's another one where it increases speed, but that is for another time, maybe. Ursaring has it. Okay, one thing I want to talk about are entry hazards. You might have seen that I set up Stealth Rocks, but there are also 2 more other entry hazards, Spikes and Toxic Spikes. Entry hazards are, well, they're hazards upon entry. When a Pokemon switches in, if they are susceptible to that entry hazard, then they will take the effects of that entry hazard. Stealth Rocks inflicts 12% damage. Stealth Rocks inflicts 12% of rock-type damage. However, if a Pokemon is weak to rock, they take even more damage, and if a Pokemon is resistant to rock, they take less damage. Then, there are the spikes. The spikes are multi-layered entry hazards, and you have to put up spikes and spikes and spikes and spikes until they do a lot of damage. The steel-type spikes, which is aptly named spikes, inflicts more damage the more spike layers you put on. There can be up to 3 spikes damage, and it does like 25% damage upon switching in. Next are the toxic spikes. One layer of toxic spikes poisons any Pokemon that switches in if they're susceptible, and 2 layers of toxic spikes toxic poisons them, which is the best. For both kinds of spikes, any Pokemon will levitate or is flying type is unaffected by the spikes. However, Stealth Rocks hits all the Pokemons, everywhere, all the time. To get rid of entry hazards, you have to have a Pokemon with Rapid Spin attack. As a rule of thumb, if you have 2 or more Pokemon that are weak to Stealth Rocks, or you just don't like entry hazards, you might want a Rapid Spinner. I personally don't run Rapid Spinners unless I break those rules and stuff. Next, I want to talk about the stat boosters. You might hear me say +1, +2, +3 that, whatever, blah 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 blah. But stat boosters are actually kind of important in competitive Pokemoning. A +1 in a stat is essentially times 1.5. A +2 in a stat is essentially doubling that stat. For example, if I had 100 attack and I got a +1 in attack stat, I will have 150 attack. But if I had a +2, it would be 200. Can you see a correlation here? At +3, it will be 2.5 times, and at +4, it will be times 3. This can go up to +6, and for lowering stats, like -1, -2, for every -1, you multiply their stat by 2/3. For example, if I had an attack stat of 100 and they lowered my attack by 1 stage, which is a -1, I will have about 66 attack. At -2, I will have a 4/9 of my original stat. At 100 attack, it'd be about 44. That's right, I use the calculator. And this kind of goes on until -6, just like +6. You know, there's a -6, +6, whatever. By now, I think I've covered a lot of the jargon that I spew out in my Pokemon videos, but there are a couple of more things. Leads are Pokemon you start out with. That's easy enough. Sweepers are Pokemon that are meant to completely annihilate a team. Late game sweepers are Pokemon that completely annihilate the team late game. Walling is pretty much just having a Pokemon just completely stopping another Pokemon from doing anything worthwhile. Scouting, which is something I don't really do in the UU metagame, is looking out for what another Pokemon could do, because there are some Pokemon that can run a myriad of different sets. Now, there are definitely things that I haven't been over, and it's actually been around 8 minutes, which means I've been talking for quite a while, because I'm actually cutting this video up and recording several segments, and it's actually been like 30 minutes since I started recording. Really, the best way to learn about competitive Pokemon battling is to watch some YouTube videos from really good narrators. Not me, obviously, because I'm not too good right now. However, a really good way of learning how a competitive Pokemon battle is to just jump right in. With Pokemon Showdown, it's easier than ever, because you don't even have to use Pokesave or whatever. You just go. Go Pokemon battle right now. Actually, if you don't want to, don't, because it's a pretty niche community, I'd say. But I've said a lot of what I wanted to say, so I will see you guys later.